My truck hit their iron gate at 40 miles an hour. Metal screamed, hinges snapped, and I did not slow down. My daughter had called at 3 in the morning. 5 words. Mom, please come get me. Then silence. When I reached the Ashworth estate, Vivian Ashworth stood in my headlights with a sneer on her face. Your daughter is where she belongs. I found Celia in a basement room, unconscious, needle marks on her arms. They had been drugging her, sedating her into silence. In that moment, something inside me turned to ice. They thought they were dealing with a 65-year-old widow. They had no idea I controlled an $800 million empire. And I was about to use every penny of it to destroy everything they had ever built. But let me start from the beginning, from the moment the phone rang at 3 in the morning. I appreciate you being here. Before we begin, if this story moves you, a like and subscribe helps more than you know. Tell me, have you ever had to fight for someone you love? Just yes or no in the comments. I read every one. Quick note, some details are adjusted for storytelling. The heart of this message is what I hope stays with you. The phone screamed at 3:03 a.m. Not rang, screamed, and I knew before my hand found the receiver that death was calling collect. My bedroom in Bel Air had been silent for 2 years now, ever since Marcus passed. The vintage rotary phone on the nightstand was a relic he refused to replace. And I kept it for the same reason I kept his photo on the dresser, his worn leather Bible beside my lamp. Some things you hold on to because letting go means admitting they're really gone. I grabbed the cold plastic receiver. Blue moonlight cut through the curtains. My heart was already pounding before I heard her voice. Mama. My daughter, my Celia, 35 years old and whispering like a child hiding from monsters. Baby, what's wrong? Water running in the background. She was in a bathroom, I realized, masking the sound of her voice. It's Wells. He's been vomiting blood for 6 hours. They won't call a doctor. Who won't? Garrison, Vivian. They say it's just stomach flu, but Mama, I know what blood looks like. Her breath came fast, ragged. They took my car keys. My phone's been missing for 3 days. I found this old landline in the guest bathroom and blood. My 7-year-old grandson had been vomiting blood for 6 hours, and his father, my son-in-law, Garrison Ashworth, was refusing medical care. Garrison, who I'd watched charm my daughter at their country club wedding, Garrison, whose smile never quite reached his eyes. I'm coming, I said, right now. Keep Wells calm and… A door banged open. Through the phone, I heard my daughter scream. Who are you calling at this hour? The voice was ice wrapped in silk. Vivian Ashworth, 62 years old, my daughter's mother-in-law, a woman who'd once looked at my modest home and said, "Oh, what a quaint little house you have." Sounds of struggle. Celia crying out. Then Vivian's voice, clear and venomous, directly into the receiver. Listen carefully, you old woman. You are not welcome here. If you come anywhere near this property, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Your daughter made her choice when she married my son. She belongs to us now. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness for exactly 3 seconds. Then something cold settled into my chest. Something that had been sleeping since Marcus died. Not panic. Panic is hot. This was ice. This was calculation. This was the woman who'd built an $800 million logistics empire, while men twice my size called me sweetheart. I dressed in 90 seconds flat. Jeans, boots, Marcus's old flannel shirt, the one that still smelled faintly of him. I grabbed the keys to the F-250 he'd refused to sell, even when the company could afford a fleet of new trucks. That truck had hauled our first loads in 1987. Tonight, it would haul something different. Garage smelled of oil and dust and old leather. I checked the glove compartment. Registration. Insurance. The envelope of emergency cash I kept for situations I'd never been able to name. Now, I could name it. This. Exactly this. One glance back at the bedroom. Goodbye to soft life. I tend to Highway 290, then Ranch Roads west toward Dripping Springs. The speedometer hit 95 in a 70 zone. My knuckles went white on the wheel. You're wondering why I didn't call 911. So am I, even now. But I knew, the way you know weather in your bones, that by the time police reached that estate, my grandson would be dead and my daughter would be blamed for it. The Ashworths owned 3 county judges. They'd donated to every sheriff's campaign since 1998. If I called the law would call them first. I passed 2 18-wheelers. One honked. Let them honk. 45 minutes of ranch roads in 28 minutes. The Ashworth estate appeared like a threat made of limestone and iron. 12-foot wrought iron gate, pillars carved with the family crest, motion sensor floodlights that hadn't triggered yet. I stopped 50 feet back, pressed the intercom. No answer. Pressed again. Garrison's sleepy voice, slurred with annoyance. Do you know what time? Let me in. Absolutely not. Leave now or I call the police. Let me in! Garrison! My grandson is sick. Your grandson is fine, and if you don't leave in the next 30 seconds, you'll be arrested for trespassing. I shifted the truck into drive. Tell them to bring a tow truck. Hands steady. Breath held. 50 feet. 30. Gate fills windshield. I think of Marcus. I think of Wells. I think of nothing. Contact. The F-250 hit that iron gate at 40 miles per hour, and the gate exploded off its hinges like it had been waiting its whole life to fall. Metal screamed. Glass shattered somewhere. Floodlights blazed white across the manicured lawn. Alarm shrieked into the October night. The truck kept rolling through smoke and twisted iron, tires crunching over debris. Headlights cutting through dust clouds that swirled like ghosts. And then I saw her. Vivian Ashworth. Standing on the front porch in a silk robe, champagne flute in hand, smiling like she'd been expecting me all along. Vivian's champagne smile lasted exactly as long as it took me to kill the engine and step out of the truck. The security guard came running from the side of the house, flashlight bouncing. Randall Hayes, according to the name stitched on his jacket. Ex-military gone soft on estate pay. 6'2" and Jim thick, more accustomed to checking cameras than stopping determined grandmothers. He'd never loaded 50-pound crates for 40 years. Ma'am, you need to leave the property immediately, or... I swept his knee the way I'd learned on loading docks in 1987, when men twice my size thought they could take shortcuts with manifests. He went down hard on the gravel. I was past him before he finished grunting. The front door was unlocked. I pushed through into a foyer that cost more than my first 3 trucks combined. Marble floors. Crystal chandelier. A painting of some Ashworth ancestor scowling down at intruders like me. What the hell do you think you're doing? Garrison Ashworth stood at the top of the stairs in monogrammed silk pajamas. My 40-year-old son-in-law with soft hands that had never lifted anything heavier than a golf club. His face was flushed with outrage, but his eyes darted toward the master bedroom door behind him. Where's my daughter? I'm calling the police. Good. Tell them to bring an ambulance. I pushed past him on the stairs. He grabbed my arm. I looked at his fingers wrapped around my flannel sleeve, then looked at his face. Remove your hand, I said, or lose it. He removed his hand. The master suite was magazine perfect. Designer linens, fresh flowers on the dresser, and the bathroom door hanging open, light spilling across Italian tile. Celia lay crumpled against the tub. My baby. My 35-year-old daughter, who used to build towers out of shipping manifests on my office floor. Her silk nightgown was twisted. Her hair was matted. Her skin was gray. Needle marks. Fresh ones. 3 of them. I dropped to my knees beside her. Hands finding her face, her neck, her pulse. Alive. Barely. Her inner arm showed 3 puncture wounds, still red. And around her bicep were fingerprint bruises in the exact pattern of someone holding her down. Baby, wake up! Mama's here! Her eyelids fluttered. A moan, nothing more. What did they give you? I examined the marks again, memorizing their position, their size, evidence. What did they give you? She gave it to herself. I turned. Vivian Ashworth stood in the doorway, champagne flute still in hand, silk robe perfectly arranged. 62 years old, silver hair styled even at 4 in the morning, watching her daughter-in-law unconscious on the floor with all the concern of someone observing a stain on the carpet. Your daughter has always been unstable. Vivian continued. She does this every few months. We've learned to manage her episodes. Episodes. I rose slowly, my knees aching from the tile. Is that what you call drugging a woman and holding her down? I call it protecting our family from her hysterics. Vivian sipped her champagne. Including protecting Wells. Where is my grandson? Safe, resting comfortably, away from his grandmother's histrionics. You think I didn't see it coming? I've been waiting 7 years for them to overplay their hand. 7 years of watching my daughter grow thin and quiet. 7 years of holidays where she flinched when Garrison raised his voice. 7 years of phone calls that ended too quickly when someone else entered the room. I looked at Vivian's smug face and calculated exactly how many different ways I could destroy her. But not here. Not now. Not with Celia unconscious and Wells somewhere in this house and sirens already wailing in the distance. The police are coming, Vivian said. I suggest you don't resist. It will look so much worse for you if you do. I didn't resist. 2 patrol cars, 4 officers. They saw exactly what the Ashworths wanted them to see. An older black woman in a work truck who destroyed a gate worth more than most cars and assaulted private security. They saw the wealthy white family in their designer robes shaken and victimized. Officers, she attacked our security guard and broke into our home, Vivian said, dabbing at dry eyes. We were terrified. Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back. I turned, I placed. You have the right to remain silent. I've been silent for 7 years, I said. That's over. The handcuffs clicked. Cold metal on warm wrists. I smiled. Garrison caught the smile. Confusion flickered across his face. He'd expected tears, pleading. The desperate breakdown of an overwhelmed grandmother. Instead, I stood in handcuffs on his gravel driveway and smiled like I'd just been dealt a winning hand. Because I had. At 3:05 a.m., before I'd even started the truck, I'd left a voicemail. 3 words. Activate the protocols. The man who received that message was already awake, already working, already making calls to people who owed me favors I'd never collected. As the patrol car pulled away, I watched through the rear window. Vivian raised her champagne in mock salute, toasting her victory. She thought she'd won. She didn't know that 3 hours from now, my attorney would file the first motion, my private investigator would start photographing, and a Manhattan banker would begin calling in every debt her family owed. She didn't know that she'd just handed me the evidence I needed to take everything she loved. The war machine was already running. She just couldn't hear the engines yet. The consultation room at Harris County Jail smelled like despair and industrial cleaner. But I'd smelled worse in loading docks, and I'd survived those too. My war machine had been running for 6 hours now. The question was whether it would run fast enough. The door buzzed. Vernon Langley walked in carrying his battered briefcase. The leather worn at the corners from 30 years of fighting battles most lawyers wouldn't touch. 58 years old. Rumpled suit. Coffee stains on his tie. The best attorney in Texas for people who needed to win ugly. Bail denied, he said, sitting across from me at the metal table. Judge Whitmore cited flight risk. Flight risk. I let the words sit there. I've lived in the same house for 40 years. Sterling Ashworth played 18 holes with Whitmore yesterday at River Oaks Country Club. That's the only risk that mattered. So the fix was in before my truck hit the gate. The Ashworths hadn't just called the police. They'd called in favors. Every institution I might turn to for help was already compromised. What about Celia Wells? I couldn't get near them. Private property, family matter, no indication of abuse. Vernon's jaw tightened. The Ashworths have a doctor on retainer who'll swear Celia's been treated for anxiety for years. Self-medicating, unstable. The needle marks, the restraint bruises. They were already building a story to explain them away. Vernon reached into his briefcase and pulled out a worn red binder. He set it on the table between us, and something in my chest unclenched. "You told me to keep this until you said the words," he said. The red binder was my arsenal, every page a bullet I'd been casting for months. 3 months ago, Celia had called me crying about problems she couldn't name. Marriage trouble, she'd said. But her voice had that particular flatness I recognized from women who'd stopped believing they deserved to be treated like humans. I'd heard it in trucking yards. I'd heard it in warehouses. I'd heard it from myself, once, a lifetime ago. So I'd started preparing, quietly, a contact list of people who owed me favors, a private investigator on retainer, a banker in Manhattan who remembered what I'd done for his institution in 2008. Protocols for scenarios I prayed would never happen. "Activate everything," I said. "Dalton's already photographing." Vernon flipped open the binder. Hugh started calling in markers at dawn. "And I've got a forensic accountant flying in from Dallas tomorrow." The Ashworth accounts. "Working on it. These things take time, but—" "We don't have time. My grandson is sick. My daughter is being drugged." "I know." Vernon's voice was steady. "That's why I filed 3 emergency motions before breakfast. We'll lose all of them, but we'll create a paper trail. When this goes federal, and it will go federal, we'll have documentation that local courts were compromised." I nodded. Long game. I hated the long game, but it was all I had. By afternoon, they released me, not because the judge grew a conscience, but because holding me longer would look suspicious. The Ashworths wanted this handled quietly. A crazy grandmother, a misunderstanding. A family matter best settled privately. The release came with conditions. Restraining order, 500 feet from Ashworth property. No contact with Celia. No contact with Wells. No phone calls, no letters, no communication of any kind. They'd freed my body while imprisoning my purpose. How do you fight an enemy you can't approach? You don't fight them. You buy them. Vernon walked me to his car in the jail parking lot. The October sun felt strange after fluorescent purgatory. I stood for a moment, breathing air that didn't taste like concrete and other people's misery. "There's something else," Vernon said as we climbed into his Lincoln. "I've been looking into why they'd risk all this now. Why drug Celia? Why the sudden escalation?" And he pulled a folder from his briefcase. "That 50 acres you gave Celia as a wedding gift. The waterfront property near Galveston. It was worth maybe $2 million when I gave it to her. The stadium deal went through last month. Commercial rezoning. That land is now worth $28 million. The number hung in the air between us. $28 million. That's what my daughter was worth to them. That's why they needed her declared incompetent, so Garrison could sell her property without her consent. They're not punishing her," I said slowly. "They're liquidating her. Garrison owes money, a lot of money, to people who don't send polite collection letters. He needs that land sale to survive." I stared out the windshield at the jail I'd just left. Somewhere across town, my daughter was being chemically erased so her husband could steal her inheritance. My grandson was sick. Alone, wondering why Grandma hadn't come to save him. They thought the restraining order was a wall. They didn't understand it was a door, just not the one they were watching. "How much debt do the Ashworths carry?" I asked. Vernon checked his notes. $17.4 million, spread across 6 institutions. I smiled for the first time in 30 hours. "Start buying it. All of it." Vernon's eyebrows rose. That's exactly what we're going to do." I clicked my seatbelt. "I can't go near them, but I can own them. By the end of next week, I want to hold the note on every mortgage, every credit line, every loan Sterling Ashworth has ever signed." The acquisition had officially begun. While Vernon started buying debt, I needed to know exactly what I was fighting. Dalton Mercer's office sat in an industrial district where nobody asked questions. The building smelled like cigarettes and bad news, and the photographs spread across his desk promised both. Dalton was 52 years old. a former Houston homicide detective who'd traded his badge for a PI license and a flexible relationship with legal boundaries. He'd worked for me twice before, once to vet a supplier, once to find a missing shipment. Both times he'd delivered results I couldn't have gotten through official channels. "I've had eyes on them for 72 hours, he said, sliding a stack of photos toward me. "What I found isn't good." The first photograph showed Celia being walked through the estate garden, 2 attendants flanking her, hands on her elbows like she was a prisoner being transported. Her eyes were vacant, her feet dragged. "She's not sick, Mrs. Kendrick. She's being made sick." More photos, Wells pressing his face against a window, crying, deliveries arriving from an unlicensed pharmacy in Katy. A doctor I didn't recognize entering through the service entrance at 2 a.m. "Show me everything." Dalton opened a manila folder. Celia's intake form at the estate claims she's being treated for severe opioid addiction. But I got my hands on real blood work from a lab tech who owes me. He spread the toxicology report across his desk. 0 opioids. 0. They invented an addiction to justify a prison. What's in her system? Massive sedatives, the kind they use for chemical restraint in psychiatric facilities. Enough to keep her compliant but conscious. Enough to make her sign documents she won't remember signing. The doctor who prescribed this. Dr. Raymond Kessler. Dalton pulled out another sheet. Board certification is forged. 2 prior fraud convictions in Louisiana, both involving insurance schemes with nursing homes. I stared at the photograph of Kessler entering the estate. A man in his 60s, silver hair, professional appearance. The kind of face that looked trustworthy on a witness stand. "They're not treating her addiction," I said slowly. "They're erasing her mind." That's exactly what they're doing, and I found out why. Dalton reached for another folder. This one was thicker. Financial records, bank statements. The kind of documents that required either subpoenas or breaking and entering. "Your husband's trust," he said. "The one he set up for Celia. $3.8 million. I was there when he signed the papers." Was $3.8 million. It's been empty since April. The room tilted. Marcus had worked 40 years for that money. He built the company from 1 truck and a prayer. And he'd set aside that trust because he wanted Celia protected after we were gone. Marcus died believing he'd protected our daughter. They waited 3 months after his funeral to start stealing. Garrison forged her signature. Dalton continued. "I have copies of the transfer documents. The signatures don't match her authentic handwriting, not even close. But the bank processed it anyway." "Where did the money go?" "Gambling debts. Garrison's been hemorrhaging cash at private poker games for years. The trust fund bought him 6 months of breathing room. They stole my husband's legacy to pay gambling debts." I said it flat, not a question, a verdict. "That's not the worst of it." Dalton's voice dropped. "The gambling debts are the tip. Garrison owes $12 million to people who don't file lawsuits. They collect differently." "Who?" "Cartel-connected lenders out of Nuevo Laredo, the kind who consider family members acceptable collateral." My hands went cold. "How long does he have?" 9 days. The deadline lands next Wednesday. If Garrison can't pay, they take what they're owed. "What happens to Celia?" Dalton didn't answer. He didn't have to. 9 days. That's all the time I had to dismantle an empire, rescue my daughter, and destroy the people who thought they could auction my family to criminals. The sedation, the incompetency play, it all makes sense now, I said. They need to sell her land to pay the debt. She refused. So they're drugging her until she's legally incompetent. Then they'll sell everything she owns. And if the sale doesn't close in time, then they hand her over instead. Dalton slid one more photograph across the desk. A man in an expensive suit stepping out of a black SUV in front of the Ashworth estate. Dark hair slicked back. Gold watch catching sunlight. The kind of face that smiled while doing terrible things. Recognize him. I didn't. Hector Vega. He's the cartel's collections specialist. He visited the Ashworths yesterday, stayed 2 hours. The photograph showed Vivienne greeting him at the door. She was smiling. The same champagne smile she'd given me while my daughter lay unconscious upstairs. "They're negotiating," I said. "They're stalling. But stalling only works if you have something to offer." I gathered the photographs, the documents, the evidence of everything the Ashworths had done. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. 9 days, I said. 9 days. I stood up. Then we have 9 days to make sure they have nothing left to offer anyone. Dalton nodded. What do you need? Everything you can find on Hector Vega. Every weakness, every enemy, every deal he's ever made. And I need to know exactly which debts Garrison owes to which institutions. I'll have it by morning. 9 days. The vultures were already circling, and I was about to show them what happened when they came for my family. 9 days. Hector Vega was already circling. I needed to move faster than the cartel. I sat in my truck outside Dalton's office and dialed a number I hadn't used in 18 years. Praying Hugh Blackwell still remembered the woman who saved his bank. The phone rang twice. Blackwell. Hugh Blackwell's voice carried the cultured authority of old Manhattan money. But I remembered when he was a trembling banker, begging Kendrick Logistics to keep shipping through the 2008 crash. His bank had been 90 days from collapse. I'd extended credit when no one else would. He'd sent a handwritten note promising to repay the favor someday. Someday was today. "Hugh, it's Lorraine Kendrick." Silence. Then, "Lorraine, it's been a long time. I'm calling in my marker." Another pause. I heard him close a door. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped. "Tell me what you need." The Ashworth family of Texas, Sterling, Vivienne, Garrison. I need you to open the ledger on them, buy all their debt, tonight. All of it. Every mortgage, every credit line, every signature loan they've ever taken. I want to own the paper on their entire financial existence. Hugh's fingers clicked on a keyboard. I'm seeing approximately $17 million spread across 6 institutions. Premium acquisition would run about 20% above face value. Do it. Lorraine, that's nearly $21 million to... I know what it costs. By morning. I want the Ashworths to wake up owing everything they have to me. Debt is a leash. I was about to wrap it around their throats. Transaction closes by midnight, Hugh said. Consider it done. But I should mention there's one debt I can't touch. $12 million to offshore entities with cartel connections. That stays with its original owners. I know about the cartel. That's exactly why I need everything else. Understood. I'll have confirmations to your attorney by morning. I hung up. The clock on my dashboard read 8:47 p.m. In less than 4 hours, I would own the financial survival of the people who'd imprisoned my daughter. But owning their debt wouldn't free Celia. It wouldn't get my grandson out of that house. For that, I needed something else. The next morning, I drove to St. Sebastian's Academy. The private school Wells attended cost $40,000 a year, money Garrison paid with funds he'd stolen from my daughter's trust. The irony burned. I parked across the street and waited. At 8:12, a black Mercedes pulled into the drop-off circle. Garrison stepped out first, then reached back to help Wells from the car. My grandson. Wells looked smaller than I remembered. 7 years old with his father's blonde hair and his mother's frightened eyes. He was wearing his school uniform and carrying a backpack that seemed too heavy for his thin shoulders. When had he gotten so thin? I got out of my truck. Wells. His head snapped toward me. For one beautiful second, his face lit up. Grandma. He started running toward me. Then Garrison's hand clamped down on his shoulder and yanked him back. "Don't you dare," Garrison hissed, stepping between us. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Restraining order. "You're not allowed within 500 feet of my son." "Wells, baby, Grandma loves you. Don't listen to her, son." Garrison's voice was loud enough for the other parents to hear. "She's a bad person. She hurt Mommy. Remember what I told you?" Wells looked back at me once. Just once. 7 years old and already learning that love could be taken away. Then Garrison dragged him through the school's front doors, and he was gone. I stood in that parking lot for a long moment, breathing through the pain. Other parents stared. Some whispered. I didn't care. All I could see was my grandson's frightened face disappearing behind those doors. Then I saw something else. The smartwatch. On Wells's wrist, half hidden by his uniform sleeve, was the smartwatch I'd given him 2 weeks ago. A birthday present, I'd told him. Something to help him feel connected to Grandma, even when we couldn't talk on the phone. What I hadn't told him, what I hadn't told anyone, was what else the watch could do. The watch. They never took the watch. I walked back to my truck on shaking legs. Once inside, I pulled out my phone and opened the app I'd installed months ago. The app connected to the smartwatch's hidden microphone. Everything within 20 feet of my grandson was being recorded and uploaded to a secure cloud server. The connection was live. The uploads were current. I pressed play on the most recent file. Garrison's voice filled my truck cab, clear as Sunday morning.
Once she's declared incompetent,
we sell the land and disappear before the cartel finds us. Mexico first, then somewhere they can't extradite. Vivian's response? And the boy. He comes with us. Leverage, in case the grandmother causes problems. And if she doesn't stop, then we leave him behind. He's not worth dying for. I stopped the recording. My hands were trembling, not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like ice water in my veins. They were planning to run. They were planning to sell my daughter's land, abandon my grandson if necessary, and flee to Mexico before the cartel caught up with them. And now I had it on tape. Every confession, every threat, every plan, uploading to my server in real time. They thought they had me locked out. They didn't realize I'd been inside the whole time. The recordings confirmed everything. They were planning to run. Now I needed to make sure they had nowhere to go. By noon, I had made 11 phone calls and declared war on 6 fronts. I was just getting started. My truck ate miles on I-10 while Hugh Blackwell's updates came through the speakers. The debt acquisition was moving faster than expected. The mansion mortgage transferred an hour ago, Hugh reported. The Porsche note closes at 2, both vacation properties by 3. And the credit lines? All 6 institutions accepted our premium offer. Lorraine, by 5 o'clock today, you will own every dollar the Ashworth family owes to anyone. $17.4 million in consolidated debt, all payable to you. I watched the Houston skyline grow in my windshield. Somewhere in that city, Sterling and Vivian were waking up to coffee and confidence. By dinner, they'd discover their entire financial existence belonged to me. What about their operating accounts? Frozen pending the debt restructuring. They can't access liquid capital without your approval. The second call was to Vernon. Leon filed 20 minutes ago, he said. That waterfront property isn't going anywhere, even if they declare Celia incompetent. Especially then, the lien predates any guardianship filing. A judge would have to resolve my claim before any sale could proceed. That's months of litigation minimum. A lien is a cage you don't see until you try to move. I had just locked them inside their own greed. There's more, Vernon continued. I pulled Garrison's flight records. He filed a plan for a private charter to Grand Cayman, departing in 36 hours. Cancel it. Already working on it. The charter company has outstanding invoices with 3 of my clients. Amazing how quickly they found scheduling conflicts. I smiled. Vernon earned his retainer, and then some. The third call was harder. I hadn't spoken to Reggie Norwood in 2 years, not since Marcus's funeral. Senator Reginald Norwood had been Marcus's roommate at Prairie View A&M, and he'd never forgotten who funded his first campaign when no one else would. 65 years old, 3 terms in Washington, and he still called my husband his best friend even after death. Reggie, it's Lorraine. Lorraine, his voice softened. I've been meaning to call. How are you holding up? Marcus's daughter is in trouble. I need your help. The silence stretched for 2 seconds. Then, tell me. I told him. The sedation, the forged signatures, the cartel connections. The incompetency play designed to strip Celia of everything she owned. Check your encrypted email, I finished. I'm sending you the evidence file. Recordings, financial documents, medical fraud. Then do what Marcus would have done. Marcus would have burned their house down. I'm working on that too, but I need federal eyes on this. The local judges are compromised. Consider it handled. I'll have FBI contacts reviewing this by tonight. Marcus would have talked me out of this. Or maybe he would have driven the truck himself. I'll never know. I hung up and let the silence fill the cab. 3 fronts secured: the debt, the land, the federal attention. But there was one more move to make, and it required a costume change. Back home in Bel Air, I stood in front of my closet and pulled out something I hadn't touched in 2 years. The tuxedo. Italian wool, hand-tailored in Milan, purchased for a honeymoon we never took. Marcus had surprised me with a trip to Rome for our 40th anniversary. I'd bought the tuxedo to wear to dinner at that restaurant overlooking the Spanish Steps, the one with the waiting list measured in months. Marcus died 3 days before we were supposed to leave. The tuxedo had hung in my closet ever since, wrapped in garment plastic, smelling faintly of the cedar blocks I used to preserve Marcus's clothes. I'd kept meaning to donate it. I'd kept finding reasons not to. Now I had a reason to wear it. The Ashworths were hosting their annual charity gala tonight. The event raised money for causes they didn't actually care about, attended by people who measured worth in last names and net worths. The kind of party where I was never supposed to belong. I'd bought table number 1 this morning. $75,000. Anonymous donor. Front and center. Impossible to ignore. They thought they were hosting a charity gala. They were hosting their own funeral. I slipped on the tuxedo. It fit perfectly. One benefit of grief weight loss: the fabric felt like armor against my skin. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. Not a grieving widow. Not a worried grandmother. Something older. Something colder. The invitation said, Houston Grand Convention Center, black tie required. I smiled at my reflection. Kendrick Logistics had built that convention center in 1987. I'd walked those blueprints with Marcus, argued with contractors, signed the completion certificates. I knew where every camera blind spot was, where every service entrance led, which fire exit opened onto the private loading dock we'd added at the last minute because Marcus insisted. They were partying in my building. They just didn't know it yet. I straightened my lapels one last time. I bought this for dancing in Rome, I told my reflection. Instead, I'll wear it to war in Houston. Time to crash a party. I knew every exit in this building. Tonight, I'd only need one, the front door. After I burned their world down. Vivian was mid-sob about our daughter-in-law's tragic addiction when I walked down the center aisle of the Four Seasons Ballroom, and every head in the room turned. 300 of Houston's wealthiest watched me cross the marble floor in my Italian tuxedo, heels clicking with the precision of a metronome. Vivian's voice faltered. Her carefully prepared speech about family struggles and charitable hearts dissolved into stammering. As I was saying, our family has faced challenges. I sat down at table number 1, front and center, impossible to ignore. I raised my water glass in silent toast and waited. Sterling Ashworth sat rigid at the head table, 68 years of old Texas money compressed into a face that had never heard the word no from anyone who mattered. He hissed something to Garrison. "Get her out of here." "She bought the table," Garrison muttered back. "We can't." You want to know what $75,000 buys? Front row seats to your enemy's breakdown. Vivian somehow finished her speech. Polite applause. The room buzzed with whispered speculation. Who was the woman in the tuxedo? Why did the Ashworths look ready to commit murder? Dinner passed in strained silence at the head table. I ate salmon and smiled at anyone who caught my eye. By the time the charity auction began, the tension had become its own guest. Our next item, the auctioneer announced, is truly exceptional. The Ashworth family heirloom diamond necklace circa 1892, worn by 4 generations of Ashworth women. Starting bid, $500,000. I watched Vivian's face. That necklace was the last unleveraged asset the family possessed. The one thing creditors couldn't touch because it was held in a separate trust. She'd offered it for auction, expecting a tax-deductible purchase by a friend who'd quietly return it later. She hadn't expected me. $500,000, Garrison called out. $600, I said. The room went silent. Garrison's head snapped toward me. Vivian gripped the tablecloth. $700,000, Garrison countered. $8, $900,000, $1 million. The bidding had become a duel. Every eye in the room tracked between us. Garrison's face flushed. He was bidding with money he didn't have. Trying to protect his mother's legacy with credit that no longer existed. $1.1 million, he said through gritted teeth. $1.2 million. I said it like I was ordering coffee. $1.2 million to the lady at table 1, the auctioneer said. Going once? Going twice? He looked at Garrison, who sat frozen. Sold. Vivian's face crumbled. 4 generations of family history, gone in 6 words. I walked to the auction table and collected my purchase. The diamonds caught the chandelier light as I lifted them. Cold and beautiful and worth exactly what someone would pay. But I wasn't keeping them. I turned toward the catering staff lined against the wall. 5 minutes earlier. I'd watched Vivian publicly berate a young server for dropping a tray. The girl had been fired on the spot, humiliated in front of 300 witnesses. Rosa Medina was 22, working her 3rd catering job this week, and had just been fired for the crime of being nervous around rich people. She stood near the kitchen doors, still in her uniform, crying quietly while waiting for her supervisor to process her termination. I walked directly to her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She looked up, startled. "Rosa, ma'am. Rosa Medina." I unclasped the necklace and placed it around her neck. The diamond settled against her catering uniform, worth more than everything she'd ever owned. "This is yours now, Rosa. Run home and hide it. It's worth more than their souls." The necklace had been in the Ashworth family for 4 generations. Now it belonged to a girl Vivian had called clumsy little nothing 5 minutes ago. Rosa's hands flew to the diamonds at her throat. "I can't! This is—" "You can. You will. Consider it severance pay from the universe." I turned and walked toward the exit. 300 faces tracked me like sunflowers following the sun. My heels clicked against the marble. Behind me, I heard Vivian's strangled gasp, heard Sterling's chair scrape back, heard the murmurs building into a roar. At the door, I stopped and turned back. Vivian stood frozen at the head table, mouth open, tears ruining her mascara. Sterling had risen to his feet but seemed rooted to the floor. Garrison looked like a man watching his future burn. "That necklace survived the Civil War," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "It survived 2 world wars and your family's entire legacy." I nodded toward Rosa, who was being hustled toward the kitchen by a protective coworker. "It just walked out the door on a server's neck." I let the silence build. "Watch closely. Vivian. That's what happens to everything you love." I pushed through the doors and stepped into the Houston night. Behind me, the gala exploded into chaos. Phones were already out, videos being recorded, the story spreading across Houston at the speed of scandal. The war had officially begun, and I'd just won the first battle. The gala's chaos was still echoing behind me when I reached my truck in the parking garage. My phone was already buzzing with congratulations from people I barely knew. Houston loves a scandal. Then the unknown number appeared. I answered. Nothing but breathing on the other end, deliberate, menacing, the kind of silence designed to make a woman feel hunted. I smiled into the darkness. "I know where you are," I said calmly. "I know what you bought today. Run." I hung up before he could respond. My next call was to Dalton. "The breathing call," I said. "Trace it." "Already on it," I heard him typing. "Burner phone, purchased at a Walmart in Katy at 5:47 p.m. today. Paid cash." But the idiot used the same parking lot ATM to withdraw the cash, so I've got his face on camera. Garrison. And there's more. Dalton's voice dropped. He made another purchase at a sporting goods store 2 blocks away. Same time frame. What kind of purchase? Glock 19, 50 rounds of hollow point ammunition. Glock 19, 50 rounds. That's not self-defense. That's execution planning. He's not trying to scare me, I said. No, he's planning to end you. Tonight humiliated his family in front of everyone who matters. A man like Garrison doesn't forgive that. He eliminates the problem. I started my truck. Then I need to move faster. Where's Celia being held? Blue Ridge Wellness Center, private facility in the Virginia mountains. I've got the address. I'm driving there tonight. That's 14 hours. Lorraine. Then I'd better get started. I pulled out of the parking garage and pointed my truck toward I-10 East. By midnight, Houston was aglow in my rear-view mirror. By 2 a.m., I was crossing into Louisiana. By 4 a.m., I was deep in Mississippi with 2 cups of gas station coffee burning through my system. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I made another call. Sheriff Boyd Thornton answered on the second ring despite the hour. 55 years old. 3 terms as county sheriff in rural Virginia. And a personal grudge against the Ashworth family that ran deeper than mine. Sheriff Thornton, it's Lorraine Kendrick, Marcus's widow. Silence. Then, I remember Marcus. Good man. I remember what Garrison Ashworth did to my nephew, too. Boyd's nephew was 22 when Garrison's Porsche crossed the median. He'll never walk again. Some debts don't have statutes of limitations. Sterling made those charges disappear, I said. DUI. Reckless driving. Everything. Your nephew got a wheelchair and a settlement with a gag order. I know what happened to my own family, Mrs. Kendrick. Then you know why I'm calling. The Ashworths are holding my daughter at a facility in your county, Blue Ridge Wellness Center. I need local law enforcement who won't be bought. What do you need? I'm giving you the chance to make it right. The line went quiet. When Boyd spoke again, his voice had changed, harder, hungrier. Tell me when and where. I'll be there with every deputy I trust. I hung up and called Vernon. The Blue Ridge facility, I said. What do you have? Agricultural zoning on a medical facility. That's a Class A violation. Vernon sounded like he'd been awake for hours. Probably had been, working the angles. The building permits are fraudulent. Fire suppression system was never properly inspected. They're operating without half the required certifications. How fast can you get an evacuation order? I make 1 call to the state building inspector. They're out by noon. The fire marshal will shut them down on the spot. Everyone inside gets transferred to legitimate facilities. Including Celia. And once she's at a real hospital, their sedation protocol ends. She'll be conscious within 48 hours. I'd been driving for 6 hours, and I wasn't tired. Revenge is better than caffeine. Make the call, I said. I want that facility evacuated by the time I arrive. Lorraine, be careful. If Garrison bought a gun, he's not stupid enough to come to Virginia. He's panicking, but he's still thinking about escape, not confrontation. You sure about that? He's an Ashworth. When things get hard, they run. They don't fight. I hung up and focused on the road. The miles disappeared beneath my tires. Tennessee became Virginia. The mountains rose around me, green and ancient, and indifferent to the wars being fought in their shadows. Dawn broke over the Blue Ridge Mountains as I crossed the state line, pink and gold lights spilling across the peaks. Beautiful country for ugly business. My phone buzzed. Dalton. Lorraine, there's something else. What? Garrison filed a flight plan this morning. Private jet charter from Houston to Grand Cayman, one way. My hands tightened on the wheel. When? Departure scheduled for 36 hours from now. He's planning to run. Sell the land, grab what cash he can, and disappear before the cartel deadline. And Celia. Not listed on the passenger manifest. Neither is Wells. He was leaving them behind, running with whatever money he could steal, abandoning his wife and son to face the consequences he'd created. He'll never make that flight, I said. How can you be sure? Because I'm going to burn every runway between here and the Caribbean. I pressed the accelerator harder. Virginia spread out before me, green and waiting. 36 hours. That's all the time I had to rescue my daughter, protect my grandson, and destroy a man who thought he could outrun justice. The race had officially begun. The Blue Ridge Wellness Center looked peaceful at 7 in the morning. All Riverstone facades and mature landscaping designed to whisper serenity to families dropping off loved ones. I had dropped off my daughter here 3 weeks ago, believing the brochures. Now I stood in the parking lot beside a white state vehicle, watching a man in pressed khakis clip a badge to his belt. Carl Jennings carried himself like someone who had seen facilities try to hide things before. 52 years old, silver at the temples. With the kind of quiet authority that came from shutting down nursing homes and rehab centers that cut corners. He had been a Marine before becoming Virginia's most feared fire inspector. And when my security coordinator Garrison called in a favor from his Pentagon days, Jennings had answered within the hour. Mrs. Kendrick, he shook my hand with professional detachment. I'm conducting a routine inspection based on an anonymous complaint about fire suppression systems. You're here as a concerned family member requesting to visit your daughter. We don't know each other. Understood. He walked toward the entrance. I counted to 30 and followed. The receptionist smiled at me with practiced warmth that didn't reach her eyes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kendrick, but Celia isn't accepting visitors today. Doctor's orders. I'll wait. It could be several hours. The fire alarm exploded through the lobby. Red lights strobed. The receptionist's hand flew to her chest. But nothing else happened. No sprinklers activated, no automatic doors released, no emergency lighting kicked on in the hallways. The alarm screamed into a building that had been gutted of every safety system designed to save lives during a fire. Jennings emerged from a side corridor, his expression carved from granite. This facility is hereby closed pending immediate inspection. Everyone out, now. You can't. The receptionist reached for her phone. Ma'am, I have authority under Virginia Code 27-98.1 to evacuate any structure presenting imminent danger to occupants. Your fire suppression system has been deliberately disabled. Your emergency exits are chained. You have 3 minutes to begin evacuation before I call the state police. Staff members emerged from offices, confusion rippling through the building. I moved against the current, heading deeper into the residential wing while everyone else flowed toward the exits. Room 114, Celia's room. The door was locked. I had expected that. What I hadn't expected was the keypad a security lock that didn't appear on any facility map. My phone buzzed. Garrison. Override code is 7729, pulled from their vendor contract. The lock clicked green. My daughter lay on a hospital bed, an IV drip feeding clear liquid into her arm. Her eyes were closed. Her skin had gone gray. She had lost at least 15 pounds since I had seen her last month. Her cheekbones sharp beneath paper-thin skin. Celia. I disconnected the IV with hands that trembled despite everything I had survived in 65 years. Celia, baby, I'm here. Her eyelids fluttered. Recognition struggled through whatever chemicals they had been pumping into her system. Mom. I'm taking you home. I lifted her from the bed. She weighed nothing. My 43-year-old daughter weighed nothing in my arms, and the rage that flooded through me was so pure it felt like light. Footsteps in the corridor. A man in scrubs appeared in the doorway. Young, startled, reaching for the phone on his hip. Mrs. Kendrick, you can't remove a patient without... Touch that phone and I'll own this building by sunset. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like the woman who had built an empire from a single truck. Your fire systems are disabled. Your facility is being evacuated, and my lawyers are already filing criminal complaints against every employee who touched my daughter's medication. He stepped aside. The sunlight hit Celia's face as I carried her through the emergency exit. She flinched, turning her head against my shoulder like even daylight had become foreign to her. 3 weeks in that room. 3 weeks of whatever cocktail they had been feeding her. Jennings met us at my vehicle, his jaw tight. Paramedics are 4 minutes out. I've already transmitted preliminary findings to Richmond. They'll lose their license by end of week. Not enough. I lowered Celia into the back seat, brushing hair from her face. I want the owners. I want whoever authorized this. The Ashworths contracted this facility 18 months ago. Exclusive arrangement. He handed me a folder. My team found this in the director's office, hidden behind a false panel in the filing cabinet. I opened it. Legal documents. My daughter's signature on every page. Shaky, uncertain, clearly signed under duress or while medicated. Power of attorney. Granting Vivian Ashworth complete control over Celia's medical decisions. Custody transfer, giving the Ashworths guardianship of Celia's 2 children. Property deed transfers for Celia's home, her investment accounts, her share of the family trust I had established 20 years ago. Mom. Celia's hand found mine, weak as a child's. Her eyes were clearer now, tears cutting tracks through the pallor of her cheeks. They made me sign papers. They said you abandoned me. They said you weren't coming. I'm here now. They're taking my babies, her voice cracked. The papers say they already have custody. Mom, they're taking my children, and I signed because they said... She couldn't finish. The sedatives pulled her back under, her grip going slack. I looked at the documents in my hand. Forged signatures. Coerced consent. A paper trail designed to strip my daughter of everything she owned while she lay drugged in a room with disabled fire alarms. My phone buzzed. Hugh Blackwell. Debt acquisition complete. We own their house, their cars, and their business loans. Ready for Phase 2. Phase 2 would wait. First, I needed to get my grandchildren before the Ashworths realized their trap had been sprung. Celia slept for the first 3 hours while I drove south on I-81. Her breathing finally steady without whatever chemicals they had been pumping into her veins. Somewhere past Roanoke. She woke up crying. Then she stopped crying and started talking. What she told me was worse than anything I had imagined. It was the night of the hospital gala, she said, her voice raw from disuse. 3 years ago. Garrison had been drinking champagne all evening. He insisted on driving. I begged him to let me call a car. I kept my eyes on the highway, my hands steady on the wheel. The mile markers ticked past like a countdown. He was doing 90 in a 45 zone on Route 9. There was a woman walking along the shoulder near her parked car. I think she had a flat tire. Celia's hands twisted in her lap. He never even touched the brakes. Mom, just hit her. And kept driving. My knuckles went white. I said nothing. He called his father before he called an ambulance. Sterling's people arrived within 20 minutes. They moved her body. Her voice cracked. She was still breathing when they put her behind the wheel of her own car. Still breathing when they staged the accident. She died alone while Garrison went back to the gala for the after-party. 3 years. My daughter had carried this for 3 years while sleeping next to the man who killed an innocent woman. Sterling told me if I ever said anything, they would take Wells and I would never see him again. She looked at me with eyes that had aged decades in weeks. I've been dying inside, Mom. Every single day. What was her name? Margaret. Margaret Holloway. She was 41, a schoolteacher. Celia had memorized every detail. I looked her up. She had 2 daughters. I filed the name away. Margaret Holloway would have justice. Not today, not tomorrow, but she would have it. We crossed into Texas at sunset. By the time we reached Bel Air, Celia had fallen asleep again, her confession having drained whatever strength she had rebuilt. I carried her into the guest room, tucked her in like I had when she was small, and went downstairs to brew tea. The front door exploded inward at 8:30. Detective Frank Hollis had been on Sterling Ashworth's payroll for 6 years. A fact my security team had documented 18 months ago. 54 years old, thick through the shoulders, with the swagger of a man who had never faced consequences. He stepped through my splintered doorframe with 3 uniformed officers behind him, warrant in hand. Mrs. Kendrick, he flashed the paper, we have authorization to search the premises. Anonymous tip about narcotics. I remained in my chair, teacup warming my palms. Help yourself, detective. Would you like some tea? He studied me with small eyes, clearly expecting fear. Finding none seemed to unsettle him. He gestured to his officers. They spread through my home with the efficiency of men who had done this before. I sipped my tea and waited. How many smoke detectors does a paranoid old woman need? As many as it takes. Garrison had taught me that lesson months ago when I first noticed surveillance on my vehicles. Every room in this house had been wired with cameras disguised as ordinary fixtures. Every angle covered. Every feed uploading continuously to secure cloud servers. Hollis made a show of searching the living room himself. He lifted cushions, opened drawers, checked behind picture frames. His movements were theatrical, designed for the uniformed audience. Then he reached beneath the armchair by the window, the one I never sat in, and pulled out a small plastic baggie. Well, well, he held it up, his smile revealing tobacco-stained teeth. What do we have here, Mrs. Kendrick? Looks like heroin to me. Smile, Detective Hollis. His smile faltered. What? I pointed at the smoke detector mounted above the bookshelf. That unit has a 4K camera with continuous cloud upload. Your performance has been streaming for the past 3 minutes. The color drained from his face. I would estimate you planted that baggie approximately 40 seconds ago, which means the footage is already backed up to 3 separate servers, none of which you can access with a warrant or a battering ram. I pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward him. His own face stared back, baggy and gloved-hand. Timestamp in the corner. Senator Norwood's office received this video 30 seconds ago. So did the Houston Chronicle. So did the FBI field office on Travis Street. Detective Hollis froze, the planted evidence still dangling from his fingers. You're bluffing. Detective? I set down my teacup with a soft clink. I built a logistics empire by never bluffing. Your career ended the moment you walked through my door. The only question now is whether you spend the next 20 years in federal prison or state prison. I smiled. You might want to call your union representative. The uniformed officers exchanged glances. One of them quietly stepped toward the door. The Ashworths can't protect you anymore, I continued. In fact, by this time tomorrow, they won't be able to protect themselves. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my home. You're going to write a very detailed statement about every illegal order Sterling Ashworth has ever given you. And you're going to pray that the federal prosecutor find your cooperation compelling. Hollis dropped the baggie like it had burned him. The video was already spreading. And somewhere in River Oaks, Sterling Ashworth was about to learn that his pet detective had just become his biggest liability. By 8 in the morning, 12 million people had watched a Houston detective plant drugs in a grandmother's living room. The number climbed by the second. My phone had not stopped vibrating since I sent that video into the world, and I had no intention of answering any of it. The hashtag started trending within 12 minutes. Justice for Lorraine dominated Texas feeds before spreading nationwide. Interview requests flooded my voicemail from networks I had never heard of, podcasters, documentarians, a producer from some true crime show. I ignored them all. Let the video do the work. I would just keep adding fuel. At 9 o'clock, Sterling Ashworth held an emergency press conference on the steps of his River Oaks estate. I watched it from my living room with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. This woman has harassed our family for weeks, Sterling declared, his silver hair perfectly styled, even as sweat beaded at his temples. She is dangerous and mentally unstable. The video has clearly been manipulated. Mr. Ashworth, a reporter in the front row cut him off. Can you explain why 80% of donations to the Ashworth Children's Foundation were transferred to shell companies you? Control quote, dot. Sterling's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a man watching his house burn while trying to convince everyone it was just a barbecue. Those are private financial matters. We have bank statements, sir, dated and notarized. Another reporter shouted over the first. What about the falsified psychiatric evaluation for your daughter-in-law?
We have the original doctor's notes showing she was never
diagnosed with the conditions listed in the commitment papers. Sterling gripped the podium with both hands. His knuckles went white. Behind him, his attorney was already stepping forward, trying to end the conference. But the questions kept coming like artillery fire. Every document I had assembled over 18 months, every receipt and transfer and fraudulent filing, was now in the hands of people who made their living asking uncomfortable questions. I turned off the television. I had seen enough. Upstairs. Celia was still sleeping. The sedatives from that facility would take days to fully clear her system. I let her rest. She had earned it. I went to my closet and pulled out a flannel shirt that had hung there for 4 years. Marcus had worn it the day we signed the papers for our first truck, back when the empire was just a dream and a prayer. The fabric had gone soft with age, and if I pressed my face to the collar, I could still catch the faintest ghost of his cologne. Fitting that I would wear it today. At 10:30, I stepped onto my front porch. The cameras swarmed immediately. 30 reporters, maybe more, had been camped on my lawn since dawn. Microphones thrust toward me like weapons. I said nothing. I simply held up a stack of bank statements, each one flagged with colored tabs, and began reading. March 2024, $450,000 donated to the Ashworth Children's Foundation. My voice carried clearly in the morning air. March 2024, $360,000 transferred from the foundation to Sterling Holdings, LLC. The cameras clicked in a continuous cascade. That is 80 cents of every donated dollar, going straight into their pockets. I flipped to the next page. April 2024. $200,000 donated, $170,000 transferred. May 2024. I read for 5 minutes, then I stopped, gathered the stack of documents, and threw them into the crowd. Papers scattered like leaves in a storm. Reporters scrambled to grab them, phones photographing every page before it hit the ground. Questions erupted from every direction. Mrs. Kendrick, any comment on the detective's arrest? Will you be pressing charges against the Ashworth family? Mrs. Kendrick, how do you respond to claims that you're motivated by a family vendetta? I paused at my front door. The documents speak for themselves. Then I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Perfect silence. Let them read. Let them investigate. Let Sterling explain away a paper trail that led directly to his bank accounts. The phone rang at 11:15. Dalton's voice was tight with urgency. Lorraine, we have a problem. My stomach dropped. Tell me. Garrison just pulled Wells from St. Sebastian's Academy. He showed up 20 minutes ago with those custody papers Celia signed under sedation. The school didn't know they were forged. They released Wells into his custody. They took Wells, my grandson, 8 years old, in the hands of a man who had killed a woman and covered it up. They're running, Dalton continued. The school security camera shows Garrison heading northwest. He's making for the airstrip. Lorraine, that flight to Grand Cayman. I was already moving toward the stairs when Celia came running down, her face white as bone. Mom, I just got an alert. Wells's school GPS tracker. He's moving. She held up her phone. The dot was traveling northwest on Highway 290, moving fast, toward the private airstrip, toward a plane that would take my grandson out of the country, beyond the reach of any court order I could obtain. Get in the car, I said. They were not just running from prosecution. They were stealing my grandson, and they had a 30-minute head start. We missed the airstrip by 7 minutes. Garrison's plane had already cleared Texas airspace by the time we reached the runway, and for 14 hours, I had no idea where my grandson was. Then the ransom call came at 1:30 in the morning, and Garrison's voice had the desperate edge of a man who had just realized his parents were not coming to save him. $25 million. His words came fast, ragged. Cash. Helicopter to the border. You have 2 hours. I sat in my truck outside my own house, engine running, phone pressed to my ear. Let me hear my grandson. He's sleeping. He'll stay sleeping as long as you cooperate. Sleeping. Drugged. More likely. The same chemicals they had pumped into Celia. I kept my voice level. Where did you land? Garrison, you're not in Grand Cayman. Your pilot filed a return flight plan 4 hours ago. Silence on the line. I had rattled him. Your parents are at the airport right now, I continued. Private terminal. They're boarding a flight without you. Check for yourself if you don't believe me. You're lying. Call your mother. I'll wait. I listened to the silence stretch. Then the click of him switching lines. The muffled sound of dialing. And then, nothing. A recording. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. 3 calls. 3 recordings. His own mother would not pick up while her son begged for help. When Garrison came back on the line, his voice had changed. The arrogance was gone. What remained was something smaller, more dangerous, a cornered animal who had just learned he had been left to the wolves. You did this, he hissed. You turned them against me. Your parents turned against you the moment you became a liability. I just made sure they knew exactly how large that liability had grown. I let that settle. The video of Detective Hollis is everywhere. The charity fraud documents on every news desk in Texas. And your wife just told the FBI about a woman named Margaret Holloway? The line went dead. I immediately dialed another number. Mike Castellano answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly with sleep but alert within seconds. He had run the Tri-State Truckers Union for 15 years, and he had never forgotten the woman who saved 3,000 pensions when the company tried to gut them in 2008. Mike, it's Lorraine Kendrick. I need every eye in Houston. Name it. Silver Lexus sedan, male driver, 8-year-old boy in the back seat, my grandson. They're somewhere in the Trinity River industrial area. The driver is desperate and dangerous. Give me 10 minutes. I gave him 5. By the time I reached the warehouse district, Mike had activated a network that spanned the entire city. 20,000 workers in 12 minutes. Truck drivers on overnight hauls, garbage crews on early routes, construction workers pulling double shifts, security guards, delivery drivers, dock workers. That was not a network. That was an army I had built one handshake at a time for 30 years. My CB radio crackled at 1:56 a.m. Got him! The voice belonged to a garbage truck driver whose route I did not know, whose face I had never seen. Silver Lexus, plates match, eastbound on Navigation Boulevard. I was already accelerating. He's turning south, another voice cut in. Old Port District, Warehouse Row. A third voice, lost visual at the Trinity Junction. He killed his lights. I knew exactly where he was going. Warehouse 7 rose against the Houston skyline like a monument to everything Marcus and I had built. We had converted it from an abandoned cotton storage facility in 1989, back when Kendrick Logistics operated out of a single truck and a dream. I had poured concrete on that floor myself. I have installed the security system. I had spent 20 years knowing every entrance, every exit, every blind spot in that building. Garrison had run straight into my house. He just did not know it yet. I killed my headlights and pulled into the shadow of a loading dock 200 yards from the main entrance. The building was dark except for a single light in the second-floor office, the one with no windows and only one door. The office where Marcus used to do payroll by hand before we could afford an accountant. My phone buzzed. Dalton. Police are 20 minutes out. FBI is mobilizing but won't arrive for an hour. Do you want to wait? I stared at that single lit window. My grandson was in there, drugged. Alone with the man who had killed once and would kill again if cornered. I typed back, no. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out a key ring I had not touched in 4 years. The master keys to every lock in Warehouse 7. Marcus had given them to me the day we paid off the mortgage, and I had never removed them from this truck. The CB crackled one final time. Mike's voice. Perimeter is sealed. Nobody gets out of that district without us seeing. Go get your boy, Lorraine. I stepped out of the truck into the cold night air. The warehouse loomed before me, dark and familiar. Somewhere inside, Garrison Ashworth was discovering that all his money and all his connections meant nothing when you ran into the building. A 65-year-old woman had built with her own hands. I still knew where the loading dock entrance was. The one that did not trigger any alarms. Time to bring my grandson home. The loading dock door groaned open on hinges I had oiled myself 3 decades ago. And somewhere in the darkness above me, my grandson was crying. Moonlight fell through the broken skylights in silver columns, illuminating dust motes and shadows. The third skylight from the left had been cracked since 1992. We never fixed it. I knew every inch of this building, every beam, every blind spot, every structural weakness we had run out of budget to repair. Wells's whimpering echoed from 20 feet up. The catwalk ran the full length of the warehouse. A metal walkway we had installed for inventory management, back when this building still held cotton bales. I could see movement up there. 2 figures, one small and trembling, one pacing like a caged animal. "Stop!" Garrison's voice cracked across the empty space. "Stay where you are!" I stopped. My eyes adjusted to the darkness. I could see them now. Garrison, standing near the center of the catwalk, a gun in his right hand, Wells's arm gripped in his left. My grandson's face was streaked with tears, his small body frozen in terror. 7 years old. Wells was 7 years old and staring down a gun held by his own father. Some things you never forgive. "Grandma." Wells's voice was barely a whisper. "Grandma, I'm scared." "I know, baby." I kept my voice steady, calm, the way you speak to a frightened animal or a man who has lost everything. "I'm here now." "Shut up." Garrison swung the gun between us. "Both of you, shut up." He was unraveling. I could hear it in every syllable. This was not the arrogant son-in-law who had threatened me at that gala. This was a man whose parents had abandoned him, whose money was gone, whose carefully constructed world had collapsed in a matter of days. Desperate men were dangerous. Desperate men with guns were worse. "What do you want, Garrison?" "Come up here." He gestured with the gun toward the metal staircase at the far end of the catwalk. "Trade places. You for him." "And then what? Your parents left you. The money's frozen. Every exit from this district is being watched by people who owe me favors. What's your plan?" "I'll figure it out." His voice rose to a shout. "Just get up here!" I began walking toward the stairs. Each step was deliberate, measured. I had climbed these same stairs 1,000 times, delivering manifests, checking inventory, building a life one shipment at a time. Now I was climbing toward a man who wanted to end everything I had built. The metal groaned under my weight. Old steel, old welds. We had reinforced most of the structure in 1995, but the right side of the catwalk near the center still had the original supports. Marcus had wanted to fix it, but the fiscal year ended before the funds came through. We just avoided that section. Everyone who worked here knew. Garrison did not know. "I'm coming. Baby." I spoke to Wells, but my eyes never left Garrison. "Grandma's coming." "Don't let him hurt you." "Grandma." Wells's voice broke my heart. 8 years old and already trying to protect me. I reached the top of the stairs. The catwalk stretched before me, rust showing through the paint, grating worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. Garrison stood 15 feet away, gun leveled at my chest. Wells stood beside him, small and shaking. I stepped onto the catwalk and began moving toward them. Not directly. I angled right, toward the weak section. The section with the compromised beam. The section that could not hold the weight of 2 adults standing close together. "That's far enough." Garrison tracked me with the gun. "Stop there." I stopped. 3 feet from the weak beam. Close enough. "I'll stay," I said. "Let him go." "How do I know you won't?" "Because I built this building, Garrison. If I wanted to trap you, you'd already be trapped." I held his gaze. "I'm 65 years old. I'm not going to wrestle you for a gun. I just want my grandson safe. You can have me as your hostage. You can make your demands, but let the boy walk down those stairs. You think a grandmother cannot fight? You have never met a grandmother with nothing left to lose." Garrison's eyes darted between me and Wells. Calculating. Desperate. The gun wavered. "Fine." He shoved Wells toward me. I caught my grandson and pulled him against my chest. His small arms wrapped around my waist, his face buried in Marcus's old flannel shirt. For 1 second, one perfect, terrible second, I thought it was over. Then Garrison raised the gun to my face. "Now you stay." His hand was shaking. The gun was shaking. "And you tell me how to get out of this building without your army of truckers seeing me leave." "Wells," I spoke softly, never taking my eyes off the gun. "Walk down the stairs, slowly. Don't run until you're outside." "But Grandma." "Go, baby, now." I heard his footsteps on the metal grating, each one moving further away, each one carrying him closer to safety. Garrison stepped toward me, closing the distance between us, 3 feet from a beam that could not hold both our weight. "Start talking," he said, "or I start shooting." I felt the catwalk shift beneath our combined weight. Just slightly. Just enough. I smiled. Garrison's eyes had the hollow look of a man who had already decided to die. The only question was who he would take with him. The catwalk groaned beneath us. I could feel the weak beam shifting, metal fatigue announcing itself in small vibrations that only someone who knew this structure would recognize. Garrison did not notice. He was too far gone. "They left me," his voice cracked, echoing through the warehouse. "My own parents left me to rot. I gave them everything, covered up everything, and they just flew away without looking back." "Garrison, I have nothing." The gun steadied in his hand, no longer shaking. That was worse. A shaking hand might miss, a steady hand would not. "My money's frozen, my wife hates me, my own mother won't answer her phone. I have nothing left." I watched him spiral, calculating distances. Wells was still on the catwalk behind me, frozen halfway to the stairs. If Garrison fired now, the bullet would go through me first. That was the only mathematics that mattered. "You have a son." 3 words. I watched them hit him like bullets harder than any gun could fire. Garrison's head turned slightly. For the first time since I had climbed onto this catwalk, he looked past me. He looked at Wells. Really looked at him, not as a hostage, not as leverage, as his child. Wells stood trembling in the moonlight, tears streaming down his face. 8 years old and caught between a grandmother who had just traded her life for his and a father who had pointed a gun at them both. "Daddy," Wells's voice was barely a whisper. "Please." Something shifted in Garrison's face. The monster retreated, just for a moment. And I saw the father buried underneath the man who had once held this boy as an infant, who had taught him to ride a bicycle, who had read him bedtime stories before the money and the power and the violence consumed everything. "He's better off without me," Garrison said. His voice broke. "Everyone is. That's not your choice to make. It's the only choice I have left." His grip on the gun loosened. Just a fraction. Just enough. I saw Wells's body tense. He was going to run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stop him, to keep him still, to wait for the right moment. But he was 8 years old and terrified, and he saw an opening, and he took it. Wells wrenched away and bolted for the stairs. Garrison's gun swung toward the fleeing child. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. Comment your guess. What do you think a 65-year-old grandmother does when a gun turns toward her grandson? Please note, some details ahead are dramatized for impact. The truth of it is what matters. I moved faster than I had moved in 40 years. My body slammed into Garrison's arm just as the gun fired. The muzzle flash lit the warehouse like lightning. Thunder echoed off the walls, and fire white-hot, searing fire punched through my left shoulder. I fell. The bullet felt like a poker shoved through my flesh. I did not care. Wells was behind me. Wells was running. Wells was safe. "Grandma!" His scream echoed from somewhere near the stairs. Alive. Moving. Safe. Garrison stood over me, gun dangling from his hand, staring at the blood spreading across my shirt. He looked confused, lost, like a man waking from a nightmare only to find the nightmare was real. "I didn't mean," he started. The loading dock exploded inward. Flashlights cut through the darkness. 6 figures in tactical gear poured into the warehouse, weapons raised. Vernon's private security teammen I had positioned here days ago, waiting for exactly this moment. "Drop the weapon! Down, down, now!" Beanbag rounds fired in rapid succession. Garrison crumpled, the gun clattering away across the catwalk grating. More lights flooded the space. More voices shouting commands. The cavalry had arrived. I pressed my hand against my shoulder, feeling warm blood pulse between my fingers. The pain was extraordinary, a living thing that threatened to swallow me whole. But I was 65 years old. I had buried a husband. I had built an empire. I had survived worse than a bullet. Wells appeared at my side, his small hands grabbing my arm. "Grandma, you're bleeding, Grandma." "I know, baby." I managed a smile. "I'll be okay." Below us, Garrison lay curled on the catwalk, sobbing. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." 65 years old, shot, bleeding on a catwalk I had built with my own hands, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Someone had called them before the breach, anticipating exactly this outcome. They worked on my shoulder while I sat propped against the railing, watching Garrison being led away in handcuffs, watching the police secure the scene, watching my security team sweep the building. Wells had not let go of my hand. "Grandma." His voice was small, urgent. "Look." He held up his wrist. The smartwatch, the one I had given him months ago, the one with the location tracker and the hidden recording feature, was still blinking, still uploading. "It got everything," he whispered. "Daddy talking, the gun, the shot, everything." I looked at that blinking light. I thought about all the evidence we had just captured. Garrison's confession about his parents abandoning him, his admission of having nothing left, the gunshot that would prove attempted murder. I started laughing. It hurt like hell, but I could not stop. We had it all. While I was taking a bullet in Warehouse 7, Sterling Ashworth was discovering that his credit cards no longer worked. I learned the details later, pieced together from security footage and federal reports. At 4:05 in the morning, while my blood was spreading across a catwalk I had built 3 decades ago, Sterling and Vivian stood at the ticket counter at Houston Hobby Airport trying to buy 2 one-way tickets to Grand Cayman. The first card was declined. Sterling demanded they run it again. Declined. Vivian handed over her platinum card, the one with no limit. Declined. A third card, a fourth. Every single account frozen solid. Hugh Blackwell had executed the final phase at midnight. Every bank account, every credit line, every financial instrument tied to the Ashworth name, locked down. The family that had spent generations accumulating wealth discovered in an instant that wealth could become worthless. "This is impossible," Vivian said, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "We have millions in those accounts." Had, the ticket agent might have said, if she were feeling cruel. Sterling, in his desperation, made the mistake that ended everything. He threw $8,000 in cash onto the counter. $8,000 in cash at an airport in 2025. Even a child knows that triggers every alert in the building. Within 90 seconds, TSA agents appeared. Within 3 minutes, their passports had been scanned and flagged. The documents were good forgeries, but not good enough for federal databases that had been updated with their names 6 hours earlier. 4 agents emerged from the crowd like shadows taking human form. Sterling tried to invoke his name, his connections, his decades of influence in Texas politics. The agents did not care. They ordered both Ashworths to the ground. Vivian Ashworth, who had never touched a public floor in her 70 years of carefully curated existence, found herself face down on airport linoleum. Her $15,000 Hermes scarf pressed against tile that had been walked on by 100,000 travelers. Somewhere, I imagined, the universe was laughing. Handcuffs clicked onto wrists that had never known restraint. Sterling was still sputtering about lawyers and phone calls when they hauled him to his feet. Conspiracy, fraud. Obstruction of justice. The charges would multiply in the coming days. But those three were enough to ensure neither of them would see freedom for a very long time. I did not witness any of this personally. I was in surgery. The bullet had passed clean through my shoulder. Painful, but not fatal. The doctors at Herman Memorial worked on me for 2 hours, while Vernon Langley worked on my legal situation. By 9 in the morning, I was out of the operating room and into a different kind of battle. Vernon met me in the recovery ward with his laptop open. The video of Detective Hollis planting drugs in my living room filled the screen. "Harris County still has a warrant for your arrest," he said. "Narcotics possession, obviously fabricated. But the paperwork hasn't been withdrawn yet. So withdraw it." "I intend to." He smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen from him in days. "I've already informed the jail that if you're not released within 5 minutes, this video goes to every network in America. It's currently at 2.3 million views. By noon, it'll be 10 million. I walked out of Harris County Jail at 9:08 in the morning, my left arm in a sling, and my phone buzzing with notifications I had no intention of reading. The sunlight hit my face, and I stopped, just for a moment, to breathe free air. The headline on my phone read, "Who is the quiet woman in the old truck?" beneath it. A still frame from the video, me sitting in my chair, teacup in hand, pointing at the smoke detector, while Detective Hollis stood frozen with the planted evidence in his gloved hand. 2.3 million people had watched a cop plant drugs in my living room. Now they were about to learn why. Celia was waiting by the curb, standing next to my old truck. She looked different than she had in the facility. Stronger, clearer, like the sedatives had finally released their grip on her mind. When she saw me, she ran forward and wrapped her arms around me carefully, avoiding my wounded shoulder. "Mom?" Her voice was steady. "They arrested Sterling and Vivian at the airport. Federal custody. No bail." "Good." I held her with my good arm. "Now it's your turn." My turn for what? To tell the truth. All of it. I pulled back to look her in the eyes. Route 9, the sedation, the forged documents, everything they did to you, everything they made you watch. Celia did not flinch. She did not look away. The woman standing before me was not the broken daughter I had carried out of that facility. She was someone who had survived, who had endured, and who was finally ready to fight back. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow, in court, in front of cameras." I squeezed her hand. "The whole country is watching now. Let's make sure they see everything." For the first time since I had found her on that basement floor, my daughter smiled. "Let's end this," she said. I looked at the old truck behind her, Marcus's truck, the one that had started everything. Tomorrow, Celia would walk into a courtroom and expose every crime the Ashworth family had ever committed. And I would be sitting right behind her, arm in a sling, daring anyone to try and stop us. The defense attorney pointed at my daughter like she was evidence in a crime scene, and I had to remind myself that breaking his finger would not help our case. Harrison Preston III had never lost a case for a wealthy client, and his $800 hourly rate bought a smile that could make jury members forget they were being lied to. He stood before the courtroom in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, his silver hair perfectly styled, his voice dripping with practiced concern. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, gesturing toward Celia. The prosecution's star witness spent 3 weeks in a psychiatric facility. She was admitted for severe opioid addiction. Her own medical records confirm this. He paused, letting the words settle. Can we really trust the testimony of a woman so fragile? I sat in the front row, arm in a sling, a cup of coffee balanced on my knee, every time Preston attacked. I made eye contact with Celia. Calm, steady, unblinking. Breathe. Baby, he is trying to make you flinch. Do not give him anything. Celia's eyes met mine. She took a breath, looked back at the jury. That was my girl. You want to know what kept Celia steady through every attack? She looked at me, and I looked back. That was all. 40 years of love transmitted in a glance, no words needed. Just the unshakable knowledge that her mother was there, that her mother believed her, that her mother would catch her if she fell. Preston continued his assault for another hour. He produced documents from Blue Ridge Wellness Center, the same facility where they had drugged her into compliance. He quoted psychiatric evaluations signed by doctors on the Ashworth payroll. He painted a picture of a troubled woman. Unstable, prone to delusions. The prosecution waited until he was finished. Then they called Dr. Iris Chambers. She had spent 20 years as a forensic toxicologist, testifying in cases across 4 states. Her hair was gray, her glasses practical, and her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had destroyed fraudulent diagnoses before. Dr. Chambers, the prosecutor said, you conducted an independent toxicology analysis of Mrs. Ashworth's blood work taken the morning she was removed from Blue Ridge Wellness Center. What did you find? 0 opioids. Dr. Chambers did not blink. 0. The patient's blood showed no trace of opioid use, current or historical. No metabolites, no markers, nothing consistent with the addiction diagnosis in her facility records. And what did you find? Sedatives, specifically a cocktail of benzodiazepines and antipsychotics consistent with chemical restraint. These drugs were being administered to the patient, not by the patient. 0 opioids. The word hung in the courtroom like a verdict. Preston's entire strategy had just collapsed. The prosecutor pressed forward. So the addiction diagnosis in these medical records, the records Mr. Preston has been citing, what is your professional opinion of their accuracy? Fabricated. Dr. Chambers looked directly at the jury. The blood work does not lie. This woman was not an addict. She was being drugged against her will. I allowed myself a small sip of coffee. It tasted like victory. At the defense table, Garrison Ashworth's composure was cracking. I had watched him through the entire morning. The expensive suit, the practiced calm, the attorney whispering instructions in his ear. But now his mask was slipping. His face had gone pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Preston leaned in, whispering urgently, we need to discredit the toxicology report. It's over. Garrison's voice was barely audible, but I read his lips. It's all over. Control yourself. The jury is watching. But the jury was not watching Garrison. They were watching Celia. And in her steady posture, her unflinching gaze, they were seeing something the defense had not anticipated. A survivor. The lunch recess passed in silence. I did not eat. Neither did Celia. We sat in a conference room, holding hands, preparing for what came next. At 1:30, the judge called the court back to order. Does the prosecution wish to call any additional witnesses? The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the people call Celia Ashworth. Celia rose from her seat. The courtroom fell silent. I watched my daughter walk toward the witness stand, not hesitant, not broken, not the fragile creature Preston had tried to create. She walked like a woman walking into war, afraid. Yes, but finished running. The bailiff held out a Bible. Celia placed her hand on the worn leather. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Her voice was steady. I do. She sat down, looked at the jury, and I saw my daughter, the real Celia, the one they had tried to erase, come back to life. The prosecutor approached. Mrs. Ashworth, I want to take you back to the night of October 12, 2022. The night your husband was driving on Route 9. Can you tell the court what happened? Celia looked at Garrison. He stared back, frozen. A man watching his grave being dug. Then she turned to the jury and began to speak. My husband killed a woman that night. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She was a school teacher. She was 41 years old. Celia's voice did not waver. And I watched his family make her death disappear. Celia reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone so old it still had physical buttons. The phone I had given her on her wedding day. The one she had never told anyone about. The courtroom shifted. Preston leaned forward. Even the judge lifted an eyebrow. Mrs. Ashworth, the prosecutor said, can you tell the court what that device is? My mother gave me this phone 7 years ago. Celia held it up. A simple flip phone. Outdated even then, she said. If you ever need help and can't call, press the red button. It records everything and sends the file to a secure server. I thought she was being paranoid. Celia looked at me. I pressed it the night of Route 9. I had given her that phone because I knew, even then, even before I understood what kind of family she was marrying into, that daughters sometimes needed protection they could not ask for. I never imagined it would capture a murder. The prosecutor connected the phone to the courtroom speakers. The first sounds emerged: an engine roaring, wind rushing through open windows, and a man's voice slurred, singing off key. Take me home, country roads. Garrison's voice. Drunk, happy, oblivious. Then Celia's voice, tight with fear. Garrison, please slow down. The sound of impact. You never forget it. Metal meeting flesh at high speed. A thud that should not exist in any civilized recording. The courtroom flinched as one body. A juror in the back row covered her mouth. The stenographer's hands froze above her keys. Screaming, tires screeching, Garrison's voice. Suddenly sober. Oh God! Oh God! Oh God! Then silence. Then the sound of a phone dialing. Not 911, not emergency services. His father. Dad! Garrison's voice crackled through the courtroom speakers. Dad, I hit someone. She's not moving. What do I do? Sterling's response came cold and immediate. Are you hurt? Is anyone watching? I don't know. I don't think so, Dad. She's not moving. Don't touch anything. Stay in the car. I'm sending people. The recording continued. Celia's sobbing in the background. Garrison pacing. Then voices other men, Sterling's fixers, arriving within minutes. Calm instructions, the sound of a body being moved. The prosecutor paused the recording. Mrs. Ashworth, there's a second file on this device. Can you tell us what it contains? Celia's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. 2 days after the accident, my mother-in-law came to our house. The second recording began. Vivian's voice filled the courtroom, ice and silk, every syllable dripping with controlled menace. If anyone asks, you were driving. Do you understand? Celia's voice, younger, terrified. I can't. Say you were driving, or we take Wells. You will never see your son again. Say you were driving, or we take your son. 7 words. That was all it took to turn my daughter into their accomplice for 3 years. I gripped the armrest of my seat. In the front row, I had the best view of Garrison's face. He was not looking at anyone. His head was bowed, his shoulders curved inward, a man collapsing under the weight of evidence he could not deny. I agreed, Celia said from the witness stand. I agreed because I was 23 years old, and they had my son. And I believed them when they said they would take him forever. I have lived with that decision every day since. The recording ended. The courtroom fell silent. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 seconds where no one breathed, no one moved, no one pretended anymore. The stenographer sat motionless. Juror number 7 was openly crying, tears tracking down her cheeks without any attempt to hide them. Preston stared at his legal pad like it contained instructions for a situation he had never anticipated. The judge finally cleared his throat. Does the defense wish to cross-examine the witness? Preston rose slowly. He looked at the jury. He looked at the phone, still connected to the speakers. He looked at his client, who had not raised his head in 10 minutes. No questions, Your Honor. He sat back down. The most expensive defense attorney in Texas had just surrendered. The prosecutor approached the bench with a photograph. Your Honor, with the recording authenticated, we wish to introduce Exhibit 47. He turned the photograph toward the jury. A woman's face, kind eyes, a teacher's smile. Margaret Holloway, 41 years old, mother of 2 daughters, a schoolteacher walking home from her night shift when Garrison Ashworth ended her life. The prosecutor's voice was soft but carried to every corner of the room. Her daughters are in college now. They will never see their mother again. They never knew what really happened until today. Celia closed her eyes. I watched a tear slip down her cheek. For 3 years, Margaret Holloway had been a secret. A body staged in a fake accident. A name Celia carried like a stone in her chest. Now the whole world knew. I thought about the phone in Celia's hand, the phone I had given her on her wedding day, hoping she would never need it. I thought about all the times I had worried, all the nights I had lain awake wondering if my daughter was safe. She had not been safe, but she had been prepared. And now Margaret Holloway finally had her name spoken in a court of law. Preston made his last desperate play before the judge could adjourn. After the recordings. After Margaret Holloway's photograph. After his entire defense had crumbled to dust, he pivoted to the only angle he had left. Your Honor, regarding the custody matter. He stood, straightening his tie like a man pretending the ship was not sinking. Mrs. Ashworth has no residence, no income, no means to care for a child. The family home belongs to the Ashworths. Where exactly would she take him? I watched the judge consider this. Preston was grasping at straws, but custody courts had denied mothers for less. Stability mattered. Housing mattered. And technically, legally, my daughter owned nothing. A child needs stability. Preston continued, pressing his advantage. Not a grandmother's spare bedroom. We must consider Wells's best interests. I rose from my seat in the gallery. The judge looked at me with surprise. Ma'am, do you have something relevant to these proceedings? I do, Your Honor. I walked toward the front of the courtroom, my arm still in its sling. Marcus's old flannel shirt worn over my courtroom clothes. Very relevant. You want to know why I bought that debt months ago? Not revenge. Protection. My daughter would never be homeless again, not as long as I had breath in my body. I reached into my pocket and produced 2 folded documents. The bailiff took them, examined them, handed them to the judge. This first document, I said, is a foreclosure notice on the Ashworth estate in River Oaks. The original mortgage was sold 3 times before landing with a holding company called Meridian Capital Partners. I paused. I own Meridian Capital Partners. I bought their debt. Preston's face went pale. The second document is a quitclaim deed, signed this morning before I came to court. It transfers full ownership of the property, the house, the grounds, all $4.5 million of assessed value to my daughter, Celia Ashworth. I turned to face Preston directly. She owns the roof over their heads now. Mr. Preston, any other concerns about stability? The courtroom murmured. The judge examined the documents with growing interest. Preston looked like a man who had just watched his chess pieces swept off the board. These appear to be in order, the judge said. Mrs. Ashworth now owns the family residence. Celia stood from the witness stand. She held the quitclaim deed in both hands, staring at it like she could not quite believe it was real. For 7 years, that house had been her prison. The Ashworths had reminded her daily that she lived there at their pleasure, that she owned nothing, that she was nothing. Now she owned it all. 7 years of flinching when he raised his voice. 7 years of apologizing for existing, of walking on eggshells, of watching her son learn that women were meant to be controlled. And now she stood before them with the deed in her hand and fire in her eyes. Your Honor, Celia's voice was steady, clear, the voice of a woman who had finally stopped running. I would like to request an immediate custody ruling. Mrs. Ashworth. Celia looked at Garrison, really looked at him, without flinching, without fear, without the submission that had kept her alive for so long. I want my son. Full custody, sole custody, and I want them out of my house. All of them, immediately. Garrison's attorney tried to object. The judge silenced him with a raised hand. Given the evidence presented today, the judge said, including recordings of vehicular manslaughter, conspiracy to obstruct justice, coerced testimony, kidnapping, and attempted murder of the petitioner's mother. He paused to let that list sink in. I am prepared to rule. Wells sat beside me in the front row. I felt his small hand slip into mine. Sole custody of the minor child Wells Ashworth is hereby granted to his mother, Celia Ashworth. Permanent restraining orders are issued against Garrison Ashworth. Sterling Ashworth, and Vivian Ashworth. They are prohibited from contact with either the child or the mother. The judge picked up his gavel. The respondents have 30 days to vacate the premises. Motion granted. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. That sound, wood striking wood, echoed through the courtroom like a door slamming. Basically, the door of a $4.5 million mansion slamming shut on 4 generations of Ashworth entitlement. Celia turned and walked toward us. Wells broke free from my grip and ran to his mother, throwing his arms around her waist. She held him tight, her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. "We're going home," she whispered to him. "Our home." Bailiffs approached Garrison with handcuffs. He had been granted no bail given the severity of charges. As they secured his wrists, he looked past them, past his attorney, past the judge, past his ruined life. He looked at Wells. "I'll come back for you," Garrison said. His voice was quiet but carried clearly in the silent courtroom. Fathers always come back. Wells pressed closer to me. I felt his small hand grip mine again, his whole body trembling. I leaned down, my voice low and steady. "No, not this time. Never again." Garrison was led through the courtroom doors. They closed behind him with a solid click. And just like that, the man who had terrorized my daughter for 7 years, who had killed a woman and made his wife watch the cover-up, who had drugged and imprisoned and threatened that man, was gone. Celia held her son. I held them both. The dynasty was finished. Garrison's threat echoed in my mind for weeks after the trial. Fathers always come back. But fathers who kill women and kidnap children do not come back from federal prison. Not for a very long time. I wore Marcus's flannel to the detention center visit, not for Vivian's sake, but because I wanted him with me when I closed this chapter. The security checkpoint took 15 minutes. Metal detectors, pat-downs, forms signed in triplicate. I walked through it all with patient calm. I had waited decades to have this conversation. Another quarter hour meant nothing. "Visitor for Ashworth, V," the guard announced. 15 minutes. 15 minutes. More than she deserved, less than she would need. The visitation room smelled of industrial disinfectant and recycled air. Bulletproof glass separated the plastic chairs. When they brought Vivian in, I barely recognized her. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on her frame. Her hair always perfectly styled at every gala. Every charity event fell in limp strands around her face. No makeup, no jewelry. No power. But the arrogance remained, even now, even here. She looked at me like I was something unpleasant on the bottom of her shoe. "Come to gloat?" She sat down heavily. "How pedestrian. I came to see you one last time. Sterling has lawyers, real lawyers." She smoothed her jumpsuit as if it were silk. "This will be sorted in weeks. You think orange is my color? I'll be in Hermes by Christmas." Orange was not her color, but justice was, and she was wearing plenty of that now. "Vivian?" I kept my voice even. "Sterling is cooperating with the FBI." Her mask flickered. "He wouldn't. He named you in 10 minutes, said the charity fraud was your idea, the fake psychiatric evaluations, the arrangements with Detective Hollis, all of it." I watched her face carefully. "He provided documents, bank statements, email chains, everything the prosecutors needed to build a case against you specifically." Vivian's hands trembled on the table. For 43 years, she had trusted Sterling to protect her, to handle things, to make problems disappear. And within 10 minutes of FBI questioning, he had handed her to them like a business expense. "He's lying," she whispered. "He's trying to save himself." "Of course he is. That's what Ashworths do." She stared at me through the glass, and for the first time, I saw something other than contempt in her eyes. Fear. Real fear. The fear of a woman who had finally run out of people to sacrifice. "Please," her voice dropped. "Wells, he's my grandson too. I love him. Surely you understand we're both grandmothers. We both want what's best for him." She tried the grandmother card. Can you imagine? After everything, after the sedation, the threats, the forged custody papers? She thought family would work on me. Family was exactly why I was there. You drugged his mother, I said. You threatened to take him away if she didn't cover up a murder. You put him in a car with a man who had already killed once. I stood. The chair scraped against linoleum. I'm thinking of Wells, Vivian. That is exactly why you will never see him again. I turned and walked toward the door. You can't do this! Her voice cracked, rising to a shriek. You can't keep him from me! I have rights! The guard opened the door. I did not look back. What Vivian did not know, which she would not learn until the following week, was that 2 walls away from our conversation, her husband was in his own interrogation room. And just as she had tried to play the victim with me, Sterling was playing the cooperative witness with federal agents. Vivian managed all financial arrangements, he told them. His voice, captured on recordings I would later hear. I was merely a figurehead, a public face. She made every decision. 2 walls apart. 2 confessions. 2 people who had been married 43 years. Destroying each other without a single word between them. But Vivian had her own cards to play. When the FBI suggested she might reduce her sentence through cooperation, she produced something Sterling had not anticipated. Ledgers, hidden ledgers, documenting every bribe, every payoff, every illegal arrangement Sterling had made since 2005. 20 years of corruption, carefully recorded in her own handwriting. These document everything, she told the agents. Every payment, every recipient, every crime my husband committed while I looked the other way. The FBI agent smiled. Thank you both. This has been very informative. I walked out of the detention center into November sunlight. The air tasted like freedom, sharp, clean, earned. My phone buzzed before I reached my truck. Vernon. Sentencing projections came in. I stopped, keys in hand. How long? Sterling, 18 to 25 years, federal. Vivienne, 15 to 20 on the conspiracy charges. Garrison, 12 to 15 for the kidnapping and assault, pending the vehicular manslaughter charges from Route 9. Those could add another decade. I looked back at the gray building behind me. Somewhere inside, Vivian was still screaming about her rights. Somewhere else, Sterling was calculating whether his cooperation had been worth anything at all. Enough, I said quietly. Enough. Enough years that they will never influence anyone again. Enough that Wells will be grown before any of them see daylight. Enough that my daughter can finally live without looking over her shoulder. I climbed into my truck, Marcus's truck, and started the engine. The dynasty was finished. Now came the work of rebuilding what they had broken. Rebuilding began with letting go. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I stood in the emptying Ashworth mansion and watched everything they had accumulated get tagged, cataloged, and sold to strangers. The auctioneer's gavel fell on Garrison's Porsche for $127,000. And I thought about the woman it had killed on Route 9. Celia stood beside me for most of it, but when they wheeled that silver car to the auction block, she turned away. I can't watch this one. Then don't. I squeezed her shoulder. Go be with Wells. I'll handle it. She walked out to the garden where her son was playing, actually playing, running between the hedgerows with the freedom of a child who no longer had to be quiet. I stayed and watched strangers bid on the furniture, the art, the jewelry, the cars. Each piece carried memories of corruption. Each sale felt like an exorcism. By evening, the auction house had cleared everything of value. The final tally came to $6.2 million. Combined with the frozen accounts and seized assets, Vernon's team calculated a total of $14.7 million. Celia held the accounting sheet in both hands, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. $14.7 million. Her voice was quiet. How do you even begin to spend money like this? I watched through the window as Wells chased a butterfly across the lawn. You don't spend it, you give it back. $14.7 million. That was the price of one destroyed family, one covered-up murder, one grandson's stolen childhood. It felt like too much and nowhere near enough. The next morning, we drove to Vernon's office. Senator Norwood was already there, his expression carrying the weight of news he needed to deliver in person. The federal investigation into Blue Ridge Wellness Center is complete, he said. I wanted you to hear this from me before it goes public. I sat down. Tell me. They found 7 other women. The senator's voice was heavy. 7 women imprisoned using the same method, wealthy husbands. Inconvenient wives, fabricated psychiatric evaluations, chemical restraint. Some had been there for years. 7 women. I had been fighting for 1 daughter, and somehow we had unlocked 7 prison doors. That's the thing about corruption. Pull one thread and the whole tapestry unravels. All 7 have been released to their families, Vernon added. Dr. Kessler's medical license is permanently revoked. He's facing federal charges for unlawful imprisonment, fraud, and practicing without proper credentials. He'll be in prison longer than the Ashworths. 7 families, I said slowly. 7 families that got their daughters back. Celia reached for my hand. Because of you, Mom. Because of us. Because we didn't stop. The idea for the foundation came naturally after that. If the Ashworth money had been built on exploitation and silence, we would use it to break both. Legal aid for women trapped by wealthy abusers, counseling for families healing from coercive control, advocacy for victims who had no voice. And we would name it after the woman who started it all, not through action, but through absence. The woman whose death had haunted my daughter for 3 years. We name it after her, I said. Margaret Holloway. Celia looked up. The woman from Route 9. She deserves to be remembered for more than how she died. She was a teacher, a mother, a person who mattered. I thought about her photograph in the courtroom. The kind eyes, the gentle smile. Let her name stand for something. Let every dollar this foundation spends carry her memory forward. Vernon nodded slowly. The Margaret Holloway Foundation. I'll have the paperwork drafted by end of week. We drove back to the estate as the sun was setting. The house felt different now, emptied of the Ashworth possessions. It was just walls and windows and rooms waiting to be filled with better memories. Celia had already started repainting. The dark colors that Vivian had chosen were disappearing under coats of warm cream and soft blue. I found myself standing at the window, watching Wells in the garden. He was running, just running, with no one chasing him, no one grabbing, no one yelling. An 8-year-old boy doing what 8-year-old boys should do. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Celia joined me at the window. We stood in silence for a long moment, watching her son discover what freedom felt like. He doesn't flinch anymore, she said softly. When doors close, when voices raise. He used to freeze, waiting for something bad to happen. Now he just lives. Neither do you. She turned to look at me, and I saw the woman she was becoming. Not the frightened girl who had married into a nightmare, but the mother who had testified against her abusers, who had claimed her home, who was rebuilding her life one painted wall at a time. No, she said. I guess I don't. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me open the message. A photograph. 2 young women, college age, maybe holding a handwritten sign. The sign read, "Thank you for telling the truth about our mom." Below the image, a message. The Holloway family would be honored to attend the foundation launch. I showed Celia. We both cried. The Holloway daughters arrived for the private dedication ceremony 3 days before the public launch. They were young, 22 and 19, with their mother's kind eyes and their own quiet strength. I introduced them to Celia, and something passed between the 3 women that needed no words. An understanding. A shared grief transformed into shared purpose. The press release went live at 9 in the morning, and by noon, Hidden Billionaire Widow was trending in 6 states. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted interviews. Television producers wanted exclusives. Financial journalists wanted to know how a woman running a logistics empire had stayed invisible for 40 years. I hung up on all of them. You're trending, Mom. Celia showed me her phone screen. Headlines scrolling past. Is our hotline working? Yes, 3 calls already this morning. Then that's all that matters. Hidden Billionaire Widow? Is that what 40 years of work came down to? A headline. Let them write whatever they wanted. My daughter was not afraid anymore. That was worth more than any headline they could print. Dr. Iris Chambers arrived at the Foundation headquarters that afternoon. She had testified at the trial with devastating precision, and now she was bringing that same precision to our mission. She would serve as medical director, reviewing cases where abuse hid behind fabricated diagnoses. "I've seen too many women drugged into compliance," she said, signing the paperwork that made it official. "Never again." "Not if I can help it." "We need someone who can spot the lies in medical records," I told her. "Someone who knows what to look for." "I've been doing that for 20 years. She set down her pen. "Now I do it with purpose." The Margaret Holloway Memorial Wing opened the following week. We hung her photograph at the entrance, the same image that had been shown in court, the kind eyes and gentle smile of a woman who deserved so much more than she received. Her daughter stood beside the plaque, tears streaming down their faces, as Celia read the dedication. Margaret Holloway was 41 years old when she was taken from us. She was a teacher, a mother, a woman walking home from work who crossed paths with carelessness and cruelty. Celia's voice was steady, the voice of someone who had learned to speak truth even when it hurt. "Every woman we help walks past her name. She is not forgotten." The foundation opened officially the next day. By December, we had helped 23 women escape situations that once seemed inescapable. That was when Dalton brought me the report. He arrived at my Bel Air home on a Tuesday evening, his face carefully neutral in the way it always was when he had news he knew I would not want to hear. "Garrison," he said. "The cartel caught up with him." I set down my coffee. "Tell me." 6 hours. He lasted 6 hours in general population before the debts came due. 3 broken ribs, shattered orbital bone, internal bleeding. Dalton handed me the prison medical report. He's in the infirmary now. They're moving him to protective custody for the rest of his sentence. 6 hours. Part of me thought good. The cartel had long memories, and Garrison had borrowed against those memories for years. Let the consequences find him. Let the universe balance its books. But the better part of me remembered that he was still Wells's father. I folded the report and set it on the table. "Make sure he lives." Dalton stared at me. "You're protecting the man who shot you." "I'm protecting Wells's right to ask questions someday, to understand who his father was and what choices he made." I looked out the window, where December darkness had settled over the garden. "That's not revenge, Dalton. That's consequence." "There's a difference. Not revenge. Consequence. There is a difference. And it took me 65 years to understand it. Revenge destroys you. It eats at your soul until you become the thing you fought against. Consequence just tells the truth and lets the truth do its work." "Revenge is about my pain," I said. "Consequence is about his choices. I didn't put him in prison. I didn't send the cartel after him. I just stopped protecting him from the world he created." I turned back to Dalton. "Keep him alive. What happens after that is his responsibility." Dalton nodded slowly. "I'll make some calls." He left, and I sat alone in the quiet of my home, thinking about the strange mathematics of justice. Garrison would spend 20 years in protective custody, safe from the cartel, but alone with his choices. Sterling and Vivian would grow old behind bars, their dynasty reduced to prison correspondence. And somewhere in that emptied mansion in River Oaks, Celia was painting new colors on old walls while Wells learned to sleep without nightmares. That night, Wells found me in the kitchen. "Grandma?" His voice was small in the darkness. "Can I ask you something?" I knelt down to his level. "Always, sweetheart." Was my daddy always bad? The question hit me like a physical blow. 8 years old, and he was already trying to make sense of the wreckage his father had left behind. "No, baby." I chose my words carefully. "People make choices. Your daddy made bad choices, but he wasn't born that way." Wells thought about it, his small face serious in the dim kitchen light. "Can people make good choices after bad ones?" I pulled him close, breathing in the smell of his shampoo, feeling his small arms wrap around my neck. "That's the only question that matters, sweetheart, and only time will tell." Wells's question stayed with me through the following weeks. Can people make good choices after bad ones? I did not have an answer for him yet. But I could show him what good choices looked like, starting with the house that had held his mother prisoner for 7 years. 14 new locks, 14 new keys. And for the first time in those 7 years, my daughter opened her own front door without flinching. Celia stood in the entrance of the mansion, her mansion now, and turned the key slowly, deliberately, as if savoring every click of the mechanism. The alarm codes had been reset. The security cameras had been repositioned to face outward instead of inward, watching for threats rather than monitoring prisoners. "It doesn't feel like their house anymore," she said softly. "It's not. It's yours. It always should have been." She looked at the key in her palm. 14 locks. I counted them twice. "Count them 100 times if you need to. They're all yours." We walked through the main hallway together. The walls had been repainted warm cream, replacing the cold gray that Vivian had chosen. New art hung where old portraits had presided, but one remnant of the past remained, Vivian's ancestral portrait, watching from its gilt frame like a disapproving ghost. Celia stopped in front of it. For a long moment, she just stared at the painted face of the woman who had threatened to take her son, who had drugged her into compliance, who had watched her suffer with aristocratic indifference. Then she reached up and lifted it off the wall. "She watched me from this wall for 7 years," Celia said. "Every time I walked past. Every time I tried to feel like this was my home." "Where's it going?" Celia folded the portrait carefully, protecting the canvas despite everything. "Historical Society. Let her watch strangers now. Let tourists file past a velvet rope while a guide explains how the great Ashworth dynasty ended in fraud and murder." She smiled a real smile, with teeth. "There's poetry in that." Wells's voice echoed from upstairs. "My room! It's still my room!" We both looked up. He was running down the hallway above us, his footsteps thundering on hardwood that had once demanded silence. No one was shushing him. No one was grabbing his arm and telling him to behave. He was just running, because he could. Then came the laughter. That laugh. Wells's laugh. I had forgotten what it sounded like without fear underneath. Pure joy. 8 years old. Laughing because he wanted to, not because he was supposed to. The sound filled the house differently now, not echoing off cold walls that absorbed happiness, but bouncing through rooms that were learning to hold warmth again. Celia pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. "I haven't heard him laugh like that in so long," she whispered. "I forgot he could." He's remembering, too. We stood in the entrance of the house that had once imprisoned them both, listening to a child rediscover joy. The December light fell through new curtains Celia had chosen herself, casting patterns on floors that no longer felt like enemy territory. "Mom," Celia turned to me, her eyes still wet, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you—" "Don't." I took her hands in mine. "Don't thank me. Just don't be afraid anymore. That's all I ever wanted. That's all any mother wants." "I'm not." She squeezed my fingers. "Not anymore." I drove home as evening settled over Texas. The December air was sharp through my cracked window, carrying the smell of cedar and coming frost. The radio played something soft that I did not really hear. Then I saw the street sign, Marcus Kendrick Way, a road he had funded in 1998, back when we were still building the company one contract at a time. The city had named it after him in gratitude for the jobs he had created, the communities he had supported. I had driven past it 1,000 times without stopping. Tonight, I stopped. I pulled my truck to the shoulder and sat there, engine idling, headlights illuminating those words. Marcus Kendrick Way. He had always loved seeing his name on things, buildings, trucks, plaques at charity dinners. He would have laughed at having a street named after him, would have made some joke about finally arriving. "Marcus, you stubborn man. You would have hated every minute of this fight. The lawyers, the strategy, the waiting. And you would have been right beside me, swinging harder than anyone." The tears came without warning. I had not cried through any of it. Not when they arrested Celia, not when Garrison pointed a gun at our grandson, not when the bullet tore through my shoulder. I had held everything together because holding things together was what I did. But sitting under that street sign, looking at my husband's name in the December darkness, something finally broke loose. "I kept it all, honey," I said aloud, my voice cracking. "Everything you built. The company, the family, our daughter, our grandson." I wiped my eyes with Marcus's old flannel sleeve. "I kept everything you built." The December stars came out above me. I sat there until my tears stopped, until my breathing steadied, until the grief and the triumph finally found their balance. Then I drove home, walked past the photo of Marcus on the mantel, and touched his face through the glass. Not bad for a 65-year-old grandmother in a work truck. That night, under the stars, something shifted inside me. The fight was over. The tears had finally come. And somewhere in the release, I found what I'd been searching for since this whole nightmare began. Peace. 3 months after I rammed that gate to save my daughter, I stood on the 40th floor of Kendrick Logistics Tower and watched her run a company. Celia sat at the head of the boardroom table, my old table in my old office, though nothing about her felt like imitation. She had made the space her own. Fresh flowers on the credenza, family photos where I had kept awards, and a confidence in her voice that no one could have taught her. She had earned it herself. "We don't cut corners on insulation," she told the board members, her voice steady and certain. "Not for any client. Not for any deadline. That's not who we are." An older board member, someone who had been with the company since the early days, smiled. "Your mother said the same thing in 1992. "I know." Celia glanced at me through the glass wall where I stood watching. She taught me, in the corner of the office. Wells sat cross-legged on the carpet with a toy truck. He was pushing it in careful circles, making engine noises with his mouth, completely absorbed in the world he was building. "Grandma, look!" He held up the truck as I stepped inside. "I'm hauling concrete like Great-Grandpa." Marcus's photograph sat on Celia's desk now. I looked at his face, frozen in time, forever 47 years old. He would have loved that, baby. Wells tilted his head, considering something. "Was he brave like you?" I knelt down to his level. "Braver," I said. "He married me." Wells laughed, a pure, unguarded sound that echoed through the room where deals worth millions were made. 3 generations in one space, the line continuing unbroken. Marcus would have loved every minute of this. The board meeting ended an hour later. I watched Celia shake hands, answer questions, move through the room with the easy authority of someone who belonged there. She was not pretending to be me. She was becoming herself, a version of leadership that carried my principles but expressed them in her own voice. I found her by the window, looking out at the Houston skyline. The city spread below us. All those roads and buildings and lives that our trucks help supply every single day. "You've got this, baby," I said. She turned. "You're leaving." "I'm going home." I touched her shoulder, the same shoulder where my own bullet scar still ached on cold mornings. "You don't need me here. You never really did." "That's not true." "It's absolutely true." I smiled. "You needed me to believe in you. That's different, and I always did." She hugged me then, tight and fierce, and I felt in that embrace every year of fear she had survived and every year of freedom she had ahead. That evening, I sat on my porch in Bel Air, in Marcus's old rocking chair, black coffee in my hand. The December air carrying the first hints of a coming front. My shoulder ached, where the bullet had passed through. It ached when it rained now, when the pressure changed, when the weather shifted. I did not mind. Some scars are just stories your body keeps telling. A neighbor walked past with his dog. "Evening, Mrs. Kendrick." "Evening, Charles." He waved and kept walking. Just a retired widow on her porch. Just an old woman watching the stars come out. He had no idea that the quiet figure in the flannel shirt had spent the past 3 months dismantling a dynasty, rescuing a daughter, and building a foundation that would protect women for generations to come. But I knew, and that was enough. The Texas stars emerged one by one, filling the sky the way they had for 65 years of my life. I rocked slowly in the chair Marcus had built with his own hands, back when we were young and the empire was just a dream. I thought about everything that had happened since that 3 a.m. phone call. The gate I had rammed, the war I had waged, the grandson I had carried out of a warehouse, the daughter I had helped reclaim her life. You are wondering what happens next. Here is what happens. I plant my garden, I drink my coffee, I watch my grandson grow up unafraid. I attend board meetings when my daughter wants company and stay home when she does not. I visit the Margaret Holloway Foundation and meet the women we help escape from shadows. I grow old in this house Marcus built, surrounded by photographs of everyone I love. And if anyone ever comes for my family again, well, you have seen what I do. They see a retired widow planting flowers. They see a grandmother in a flannel shirt. They see an old woman in a rocking chair with nothing but time on her hands. Never underestimate a quiet woman with nothing to prove, but everything to protect. Somewhere in this city, my daughter was closing her first board meeting as CEO. Somewhere, my grandson was dreaming of hauling concrete like his great-grandfather. Somewhere in a prison, the people who hurt them were counting days they would never get back. And here I sat, 65 years old, bullet scar on my shoulder, empire in good hands, and absolutely nothing left to prove. Just everything to protect. And to you listening to my story, remember this: never underestimate a quiet woman with something to protect. Looking back, I see the moments I almost gave up, the nights I questioned myself. Was I doing this for Celia, or was this becoming a revenge story about my own wounded pride? That question kept me honest. I had to make sure every choice served my daughter's freedom, not my anger. That difference matters more than you know. What I learned is this: there is a difference between revenge and consequence. Revenge destroys you from the inside. It turns you into the very thing you are fighting. But consequence is just telling the truth and letting the truth do its work. I believe God gave me the strength to know the difference, to fight without losing my soul. This was not a simple revenge story. This was a mother protecting her family, and sometimes protection looks like war. If this story moved you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to fight for someone you love? Share this with someone who needs to hear that quiet strength is still strength. And if you want more stories like this revenge story of a grandmother who refused to stay silent, please subscribe. Thank you for staying until the very end. Please remember, some details in this story have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling purposes. But the heart of it, the lesson about protecting what matters most, that is as real as it gets.